How did a Michelin star chef end up 500 years in the past, wandering the realm of a tyrant? Let's find out in Season 1, Episode 1 of Bon Appétit, Your Majesty. How's it? I'm Evie, and welcome to After the Episode. On this channel, you'll explore unforgettable Korean dramas and anime. The epic action, wild twists, and moving moments. Let's tuck in. The royal cook Ji-young is in big trouble. She's being escorted by armed guards to face judgment from the tyrannical king Yi-hun. The assembled ministers declare her a malevolent spirit and demand that her life be ended for her crimes against the throne. Swiftly unsheathing his blade, the king makes a decree that shocks the room. He appoints the terrified woman kneeling at his feet as the new head cook of the royal kitchen, but he gives her a menacing ultimatum. Either cook innovative meals of his liking every single day, or go to the grave. He seems nice. Ji-young can't believe this is happening to her. All she ever wanted was to be a Michelin star chef, but now she has no choice but to wine and dine a despot to the end of her days. How in the wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey did Ji-young end up here? It's the year 2025, and Ji-young is one of 4 finalists in the prestigious French cooking competition. The final challenge in this month-long televised contest is to create a meal fit for a king. It's down to the final minutes, and Ji-young has a problem. Her gas stove won't ignite, and she has yet to complete the crucial last step of flame grilling the steak. Knowing that she'll face disqualification if she fails to finish, she decides to take an unconventional approach and flame grills the steak using straw. She completes her dish in the nick of time, and the judges deliberate on the contestants' dishes one by one. When they reach Ji-young, the final contestant, she explains that the venison steak she prepared is an homage to a famous Joseon dynasty king named Yeon Hee-gun, who was a tyrant with fine taste buds. The judges are so impressed by the skills she demonstrated in creating this flavorful masterpiece that she's awarded the grand prize, 100,000 euros and a position as a head chef at a 3-star Michelin restaurant. Ji-young is overjoyed and celebrates her victory on this magical Parisian night where her dreams have come true. The next morning, Ji-young is on the phone with her dad, who is so proud of her. She tells him that she'll be flying back home that day, and she'll even be able to see the solar eclipse from the plane. At the end of the call, he reminds her to bring the antique book that was mailed to her from an Asian history professor. Sometime later, Ji-young is on the plane having her in-flight meal. She pockets the bread and butter and adds her trusty gochujang chili paste to the meal. As the solar eclipse draws near, the passenger next to Ji-young tries to take pictures from his seat, but accidentally knocks over a cup of coffee on the antique book, so she goes to the bathroom to try to clean it up. When she flips through the book called the Mangunruk, she discovers that it contains recipes, a ripped-up page in the middle, and an inscription in the back, which she reads aloud. To my dearly beloved, if you read this someday, I hope that you will return to me. Suddenly, the pendant on the book begins to glow, and as the solar eclipse reaches its peak, the bathroom starts to shake violently. Just the bathroom, though. The rest of the plane is perfectly normal. Ji-young bangs desperately on the door for assistance, to no avail. Then the bathroom lurches sharply, the book glows brightly, and she's unceremoniously sucked into its pages. Screaming at the top of her lungs, she hurtles through space and time and finally comes to a stop on the forest floor. She barely has a second to take a breath before she's airborne again, this time caught up by a net. Dangling from the tree, she passes out and the book ceases to glow. Some distance away in the same forest, the king and his men are on a deer hunt. The poor thing is being chased by at least 30 men, some on horseback, others on foot, and even a few playing the drums. Isn't that a bit excessive? What did Ban B do to him? The king is ahead of them all and manages to strike down the deer. As he does so, he remembers how defenseless his own mother was when she was dragged out of the palace, and how helpless he was as a boy to go to her aid. He commands the chief eunuch of food to make sure that the deer meat is returned to the palace, and the chief eunuch inquires whether it might be prudent for them all to return to the palace, given that the forest isn't safe, what were the rebels all about? Even though the king was attacked by rebels during his last hunt, he's not concerned about the danger and wishes to enjoy the rest of his hunt on this special day of the solar eclipse. Meanwhile, at the palace, the king's absence has not gone unnoticed. It's the 10th anniversary of his reign, and a sacred ritual is underway. The king's grandmother is in her chambers with the king's concubines, half-brother, and stepmother, and she's furious that he'd missed such an important event for a deer hunt. One concubine proclaims that a solar eclipse is a signal from the heavens to show their displeasure with the king's actions, while another reflects that the king can't even refrain from bloodshed for one day. The king, however, only listens to his favorite concubine who encouraged him to go on the deer hunt in the first place, and they lament that not a single day goes by peacefully because of her. Oh, she sounds messy. I don't know about you, but I can't wait to meet this conniving concubine. She sounds like the very definition of, I don't want peace, I want problems, always. While the two concubines call for the Dowager Queen to remind the wayward concubine to know her place, she quietly ponders whether the king is absent for reasons other than the deer hunt. The king's mother passed away around this time of year, but is he aware of what really happened on that fateful day when his mother was deposed? Elsewhere in the palace courtyard, the ritual is proceeding without the king, and his ministers think it's shameful for him to be off hunting on a stately occasion such as this. The king's uncle, Prince Jason, drunkenly quips that the king must have had his tender feelings hurt again and wonders who could have done it this time. Prince Jason seems messy too. The chief royal secretary is also absent because he's on yet another round of the Chehung to gather all the eligible women to be brought before the king, and the ministers bemoan the sad path that the nation is on. While his ministers gossip behind his back, the king is in the forest sipping tea and waiting for the eclipse. When he loudly tells his men that whoever strikes down the most deer on the hunt will receive a special award, even his commander thinks he's doing too much. He's genuinely concerned that the king is angering the heavens so much that a female ghost will appear, but the king confidently says that he doesn't believe in superstitions. He intends to meet with the chief royal secretary on his next stop of the Chehung, which is in Gyeonggi. It's been a while, so let's check up with our girl Ji-young, who has just woken up in a net and is understandably very confused. She calls out for help, but no one answers, and tries to use her phone, but there's no signal. Back with the king, he's just spotted a fox and immediately chases after it on horseback, leaving his men behind. Ji-young is still in the net, bitterly complaining about how trash the 5G signal is when 2 arrows fly past her head. The third hits the rope keeping her suspended in the air, making her drop to the ground in a heap. Once she's detangled herself from the net, yet another arrow heads her way. As she screams at whoever is doing this to stop aiming arrows at people, she comes face to face with the king, who demands to know who she is. Based on her bizarre appearance, she's clearly a suspicious entity, so he loads his bow and chases her, demonstrating just how little he believes in superstitions. But props to Ji-young though for her excellent running ability. Girl, tell us your cardio routine so that we too can outrun a horse. I reckon she would have kept on going, were it not for the cliff. As the solar eclipse passes, she faces off with the king. He demands to know her identity and she berates him for the attack. When he reloads his bow again, she takes out her stun gun, making it spark, and his certainty that she's a ghost increases even more at this. He's positively apoplectic at the casual tone she addresses him in, and is done with her inane babble, so he sends another arrow her way, which misses her but sends her handbag flying off the cliff. Now she's really riled up and is ready to throw hands, report him to the police, and sue him into oblivion. Smiling, he gets off his horse and unsheathes his sword, since he's out of arrows. She aims the stun gun at his sword, and I was hoping the shock would lay him out or at least sting a little. Instead, it has no effect whatsoever. He advances on her with a smug look on his face, ready to swing the sword, when out of nowhere, an arrow suddenly pierces his chest. Phew! Shout out to the masked man for his timely intervention, otherwise our girl would have been a goner. Unfortunately for Ji-young, she's standing too close to the king, so when he topples, he takes her with him off the cliff, and you can't convince me that he didn't use this last moment of consciousness to mess with our girl. Meanwhile, the king's men search the forest for him and recover his bow, but fail to notice Ji-young's bag hanging off a tree branch on the cliff's edge. Elsewhere, we meet the chief royal inspector and his father on the way to visit the governor of Gyeonggi, who keeps writing letters to the king about the undue influence of the king's favorite consort. The governor needs to be dealt with, so the chief royal inspector has hatched a plan to force all the kitchen maids at the governor's residence to flee for their lives. We rejoin Ji-young, who has just woken up on the riverbank with the still unconscious king by her side. Despite his awful behavior towards her, she still saves his life by staunching the wound with her scarf and the ointment she had in her pocket. He repays her kindness by pointing a blade at her. She explains that she had nothing to do with him being attacked earlier and was only checking his pockets for a phone to call the ambulance. None of this makes sense to him, and he's ready to attack the ghost when she kicks him hard in the shins and takes his blade. A scuffle ensues, and he keeps demanding to know who she is, and she tells him that she's a cook. Ji-young throws sand in his face, literally kicks his behind, and ends the proceedings by headbutting him unconscious. That last move was an accident, but effective all the same. Just to be on the safe side, Ji-young ties up the strange man to a pole and prods him awake with a stick. He can either stay where he is or come with her, and the king, still seething at the indignity of their situation, relents. Although he's come to accept that she doesn't want to off him, he still stubbornly clings to the notion that she's a ghost. Holding the other end of the rope, she frog marches him away from the lake. Back at the palace, we finally meet the king's favorite concubine, Mokju, and Diva is flawless. She has just learned from her court lady Chuwol that the king hasn't returned from the hunt. He may love hunting, but even this seems abnormal. She wonders whether Prince Jae-sun, the king's uncle, had a hand in his disappearance and has chosen this moment to finally make a move on the king. In a flashback to 7 years prior, Mokju is in a prison cell where she meets Prince Jae-sun for the first time. She's in custody for slaying her nobleman husband, who by all accounts sounds like a jerk who had it coming. Mokju has no regrets for ending his life, which convinces the prince to set her free in exchange for her loyalty. Mokju isn't buying it though and tells him straight up that she has no problem dispatching him just like she did her dearly departed husband. I don't know about you, but I'm already a huge fan of Mokju, unhinged as she is. The prince seems like a fan of hers as well and tells her that she can't take his life because he already lost it a decade ago. Sounds ominous. I wonder what drove him down this path. Presently, Mokju realizes that the prince wouldn't act so rashly now when he's been lying in wait all this time, so she sends her handmaiden Chuwol to deliver a message to him. The prince receives the message and relays it to the other 6 conspirators in the room with him. They think that whoever is behind the king's disappearance could be someone connected to the massacre ordered by the king in the 4th year of his reign. So many people have lost friends and family to the king's savagery that really the list of suspects is endless, but if any one of the people in the room of conspirators acted prematurely, the prince will make sure that they pay the price for jeopardizing the plan to save the nation from the tyrant. Wow, Prince Jae-sun is such an interesting character. He's a highly intelligent man on a mission, but to the outside world, he presents himself as an amiable drunk who's no threat to anyone. I can't wait to see how his plan unfolds. For the time being, though, we're back in the forest with the king and Ji-young. They've been walking for hours and they're exhausted. They stop for a breather and try to have a civil conversation, each failing to persuade the other of their true identity. The king tries to prove it by showing the royal dragon on his robes, but Ji-young points out that any tourist could rent that out of the palace. Bewildered, he decides a different tact. Even though she's not his type, he promises to bestow his royal favor. As he's smoldering at her and thinking, "Oh, you're about to catch these feelings," she's outraged and thinking, "Oh, you're about to catch these hands," and promptly whacks him on the head for his crass words. She's been very understanding of his mental difficulties thus far, but she won't tolerate this nonsense. What do you think stings his ego more, the head smacking or the tongue lashing? Let me know in the comments. They keep bickering with each other when they come across a house which will soon be demolished to make space for the king's hunting grounds. Ji-young doesn't know the term he uses for the prohibition signs at first, but then remembers from history that the policy was from the time of a king called Yeon-hee-gun. The king doesn't recognize this name as belonging to anyone in the royal family, so Ji-young explains that the tyrannical king Yeon-hee-gun sent his treacherous subjects to carry out the Chaehung, the policy of gathering eligible women to bring to the palace. The king is puzzled because she's talking about his policies, and Ji-young is surprised that he's never heard of the tyrant who took pleasure in tormenting his people. The king is quick to justify the actions of beheading disloyal subjects and destroying people's homes as necessary to keep the kingdom running smoothly. Even the Chae-hoong is noble in his eyes, and he's getting so testy about it that Ji-young asks why he's getting so heated over a situation that has nothing to do with him. He composes himself and explains to her that the Chae-hoong is about maintaining the royal line, and so the women selected should be honored and the Chae-hoong inspectors should be held in high regard. She immediately calls cap, pointing that King Yeon-hee-gung was actually just a playboy. This whole conversation has shown Ji-young that his worldview is a red flag, so she decides to tie him to a pole. Girl, yes, protect your peace of mind. She goes into the house and changes out of her clothes, only to discover someone in there. Gil-gum, who has been hiding under some straw, lunges at Ji-young with a broom for stealing her clothes. Ji-young apologizes and frantically asks where they are. Gil-gum begs her to keep her voice down because if they're discovered in the king's hunting grounds, then they'll be taken away for the Chae-hoong. Although Ji-young is frustrated that even this girl is committed to the cosplay, the truth is slowly beginning to dawn on her that she really has traveled back in time. She collapses on the ground, and as she tries to convince herself that this is all a bad dream, both their stomachs begin to grumble. Ji-young offers to make a meal for them if Gil-gum can take her to the cliff where she last saw her handbag, and Gil-gum agrees with a smile. They begin to gather ingredients to prepare the meal while the king seems to have passed out. Gil-gum has a keen sense of smell and forages for the best ingredients using her nose. Ji-young uses Gil-gum's ingredients along with the gochujang paste and butter she had in her coat pocket to create a delicious meal. Just letting you know, this is the kind of show that you watch when you're eating your own snacks or when you already have a full stomach, because it will make you hungry. Ji-young wakes up the king and offers him the delectable dish, but he's still sulking, so he declines at first. His stomach is singing a different tune, however, so he grudgingly agrees to try the food, only if she eats it first, in case she poisoned it. Gil-gum returns with the bowls and Ji-young introduces her to the king. When Gil-gum acts nervously around him, Ji-young assures her that he's not all bad, just a little troublesome. You'd think she was talking about a puppy that likes to chew on people's socks. She takes the first bite of the food and is very satisfied with what she's made. The king tastes the food and immediately thinks she's trying to poison him because his mouth is on fire. Gil-gum takes a bite and has the same reaction to the spice. Ji-young resolves to eat the food all by herself since they're acting so ungrateful, but Gil-gum has recovered enough to realize that it's actually the most delicious thing she's ever tasted, and the king also agrees to give it another go. The wholesome food makes him think about his beloved mother, the deposed queen, and happier times when they ate together, and it brings tears to his eyes. So, there's more to him than rage and bloodlust, it seems. Elsewhere in the forest, the king's men continue to search for him. Soundly asleep at the house, Ji-young and Gil-gum leave him behind to search for the handbag. They reach a stream and decide to clean up a bit since Ji-young has had a very long day. The king has had quite the traumatic day himself, so when he's finally rescued by his men, he's hell-bent on finding the ghost who humiliated him. I guess the soothing recollection of his mother has passed and he's returned to his factory setting of rage and bloodlust. Blissfully unaware, Ji-young and Gil-gum are still chatting by the stream. Gil-gum tells her that she's been living in that house to avoid the Chae-hoong. This doesn't make sense to Ji-young because historical records say that the Chae-hoong was from the time of the king named Yeon-hee-gun, yet Gil-gum doesn't know that name either. She's momentarily distracted from the conversation because she sees people in the distance. She's thrilled and waves her hands energetically to get their attention. Has the tyrannical king caught up with Ji-young already? And what will he do to her if he has? We'll see you in my next recap video in episode 2, so check it out. Links are in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.